Alright guys, let's take the sprocket off. If it's a little bit stuck, you can always just take a pry bar and slide it off. There we go. So guys, that is our sprocket, and then we also have a clip on the inside. So guys, the orange section on the inside of the ring, that goes towards the sprocket side. So the black side here, so the black side goes to the block side. So the crankshaft oil seal seems to be okay. It looks all right. So guys, because this is my car and this thing has never actually been cleaned out, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take my degreaser, I'm gonna spray up here, here, and everywhere else. While I give this some time to soak, I'm going to look at the new water pump, we'll compare, and get ready for reassembly. Alright guys, this is our old pump, this is our new one. Make sure they match, which they do. So we're going to take our gasket. Alright, our gasket is on. So now we're going to go throw the new water pump onto the block. Alright guys, I've already done this, but make sure that you clean up around the mating surface. Make sure you don't have any old gasket or anything like that. If you need to, you can always use a Scotch pad, a little scrubby pad to clean it up, but this looks to be all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started. I'm going to put the water pump on and get the bolt started. Alright guys, I would just go in a star pattern. Alright, so I got all the bolts back in, including the 14 mil here for the alternator. Guys, for torque, I would say just tighten it up until they're snug and then give it an extra quarter turn. From what a lot of mechanics have told me, they don't really torque anything whatsoever except maybe like head bolts. But in this case, guys, it's only aluminum, so don't go crazy with it. But with the water pump now back on, the next thing I'm going to do is put on the tensioner pulley. So we have the 14 mil for that. The peg, the orange peg is right here. And then the other peg is on the bottom. Alright guys, I went ahead and I put on the tensioner so it fits onto the pin here. And then that is the orange peg. The spring clips into the smaller hole. You can only put this on one way. So guys, for the 14 mil here, put it on but leave it loose, because once the timing belt is on, we got to tension it. So just leave this hand tight for now just to keep it there. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is get our little sprocket on. So you see how it's beveled here, and then the worn side is here. So the worn side goes out towards the sprocket. And now our sprocket, which has the keyway right there, it'll only go on one way. Alright, with the sprocket on, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put on the timing belt. Alright guys, so I'm going to re-line up the marks on the belt. Alright, so we have our timing belt roughly back on position. So guys, this is our crank sensor. Put the peg on the little snooby that sticks out. Tighten up the 10 mil bolt and make sure that you put the rubber grommet back into its groove. Alright, so guys, our bottom timing mark is, you have a mark here. I'll show you, and then there's an arrow up there. You gotta line the two up. Alright, so guys, you can see the line there, and you can see the bottom of the arrow. So we are lined up here on the bottom. The belt lines up with the mark that I made. Guys, where the belt is along the track, it doesn't really matter, but I did it just for my own sake, so it's going to be easier. And once again, make sure that you push the rubber grommet back in. So next thing I will do is put on the lower timing cover. Alright, this is our lower timing cover, so make sure that you put the gasket back in. So I am going to throw this back on. I'll put these two bolts in first, and then we'll come back. Alright guys, before you put your cover back on, make sure that you pop out this little cap. That's it right there. That's for your tensioner. So I've already tightened up this bolt and this 10 mil down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up the other bolt, wherever it is, up here in the middle. Alright guys, so next we'll get our harmonic balancer put back on. So I've already put on the keyway. This only fits in one way. Alright guys, so we'll put our crank pulley bolt back in. What is the torque for this? I don't know. Just tighten it down. Just don't go crazy about it. And I also put the crank sensor back into the groove. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get the timing belt over the camshaft sprocket. So this mark here on the belt, my goal is to line it up on this mark here. Alright, so this is our tension side, this is our slack side. So we're going to try to get the tension side on first. Now, I would suggest try to get the belt just barely over the teeth and work your way across. Alright, so to tension our belt, I'm going to hold the cam sprocket in place, and then I'm going to turn the crankshaft in a counterclockwise direction. Alright, so our arrow and our up, that matches up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts for the lower cover. I'm going to leave this one out for now. Alright, so this is the clip for our oil dipstick. So we're just going to push it back into position. There we go. Alright guys, I've already done this, but make sure that you put your engine bracket back in. So these are 3/17s. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up the tensioner down in the hole with a 14mm socket. Alright, I have the 14mm hooked onto the tensioner. So guys, right now just tighten it up. Alright, that should be okay. So guys, in my case here, because this is DIY, this is not an automotive shop, what I suggest is now is the time to refill the cooling system. Because I drained out the radiator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hose off. I'm going to fill up the block. I'm going to take off the cap. I'm going to fill up the radiator. And now I'm going to run the engine until it hits operating temperature. The reason I'm going to do it like this is because if I have a problem, before I put on my power steering and my alternator belts back on, I have less work to go to fix the problem. Guys, an automotive shop will not do this. They're a lot better than I am. But in this case here, to save myself grief, in case there's a problem, I'm going to test the system now. Alright guys, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the alternator belt. So with the alternator belt, you see ALT. Guys, I suggest you mark as you go along so you know what goes to what. This is a relatively small job, but as things get bigger, it's a lot easier to get confused. So through the top, I'm going to feed the belt down. Alright, so the alternator belt is on the pulley closest to the engine block. Guys, make sure that your belt is straight. Like, you see how the belt is straight. If your belt is not straight, over time it's going to wear out your pulleys and it can damage your belt as well. In this case, if you lose your alternator, your car is only going to die. But as a rule of thumb, guys, make sure everything is straight and aligned so you don't run into any problems. But with the belt on now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a pry bar, and then we're going to push the alternator forward, and then we're going to tighten up our 12 mil here to hold it in place. Alright, so I'm going to take a pry bar, and then I'm going to push the alternator. I'm going to put pressure on it, and then I'm going to tighten up the bolt. Alright, so I have the 12 millimeter wrench on the tightening bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push on the alternator outward to put tension on the belt, and then I'm going to tighten it down. Once the tensioner is tightened up, I'm going to go and I'm going to tighten up the other two 14 mils. Alright, with the alternator tightened into position, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up the top and the bottom 14 millimeter bolts to hold it in place. Alright guys, so this nut here, this was a 14 millimeter, it's stripped, so I replaced it with a new one. The new one is 11/16. Guys, just really quickly, make sure that you check, once again, the size of your nuts and bolts if you have to change them, so you don't strip them. Alright, so this is our power steering pulley, and then down there in line is our crankshaft pulley. So guys, make sure that your power steering pump is loose, that it'll move back and forth. And then feed your pulley around the power steering pump, and then around the crankshaft pulley. Alright, with our belt around our power steering pump, in this case here, you have a 1/2 inch square. That is for a breaker bar to be put on. Like that, and then you're going to pull this out. Now guys, really quickly, when I did this, or when I took it apart, you can actually see the imprint of the bolt on the bottom. So guys, make note of where it was before. This one didn't go to the very end, it was right here, so I'm going to aim to put it in the same place. And guys, make sure that you give it a tug as well, to verify the tension that it was before. So now this is our ground, we're going to put it here. This is 10 millimeter. Alright, so the last thing is the upper timing bolt cover. Guys, I didn't mention this, but when you go to test the engine, make sure that you put your valve cover back on, tighten up the bolts so you don't have oil spewing everywhere. Alright, so we're going to put our nice clean valve cover gasket back on. Alright, we'll put back in the 3 10 mil bolts. Alright, now I'm going to put the tensioner plug back on. I probably should have done this earlier. Alright, so I'm going to put the valve cover back on. I have a new valve cover gasket. I also put in new seals. They all come in the same kit. The last time I did the valve cover gasket, I don't remember when I did it, but guys, you are supposed to put in sealant around the distributor here, and then the cam here. And here I don't have any sealant, and I'm not going to go out and spend money on something that is not technically necessary for a DIYer in my case. But we're going to put the valve cover on. Give it a push. Now guys, the 3 short ones go in the front, and then our 2 long ones go in the back. So thread them hand tight and then tighten it down. Alright, to finish, I'll put on the splash guard, and then we'll put the tire back on, lower the car, and take it for a test drive. Alright, last 2 things is we're going to put our power steering high pressure hose back in. This is one of the many clips I broke. And guys, don't forget to put the other one back in. Take your needle nose or channel locks and just slide the bracket back on. But guys, with that all done, we are finished with this job. So what we'll do now is an overview. Alright guys, so that concludes this job. So I went overboard to really clean stuff up and degrease it. I mean, it's my car, so we're talking 20 years of accumulation, because I've never actually taken off the lower timing cover myself. I've had work done on the car by somebody else, but of course it's not there, so they're not going to worry about cleaning everything up, degreasing it, and putting it all back together. The time on this job, the time was about 8 hours. I ran into some problems. I broke a lot of clips. The plastic, the material here is now old, but everything got done for the most part. I mean, I'm fairly happy with it. Also, I ran the engine up to operating temperature, and then I filled it with coolant before I took it out on the road in case something was leaking. At least I could address it without having to tear everything apart. The cost of this job, the water pump was about $60, and then the valve cover gasket was $30. Guys, with tax, let's call it $100 in total. At an automotive shop, this job must be $600, somewhere in that range. So guys, I hope what I've done here will help you and help you build confidence. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, until next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.